Newsfirst Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Live. Now then, as usual, we're at work, aren't we? For a day or anything like that, notwithstanding. But really, the question is Sri Lanka drifting aimlessly with no plan and certainly no real budget? Let's find out, shall we? We're joined here by Dr. Harsha de Silva, Member of Parliament from the SJB, also, of course, very famously known as Mr. 1990. Really, very good evening to you.
Good evening for us.
Do we need to call 1990 in terms of our economy? Are we drifting aimlessly?
Like somebody said, you know, we should be now in the emergency room.
Oh, yeah. Is it that bad?
It's very, very bad. It's extremely bad.
Now, I also noticed something, and that is that this budget has nothing separately set aside for women and women's activities.
I mean, you know, well, I don't, you know, I can't speak about that necessarily because, you know, even though they may not have, you know, specifically,
it might be hidden away somewhere.
It might be. I mean, I'm sure, right? Yeah. But the bigger issue is not that. The bigger issue is with agriculture.
Indeed.
You know, I mean, this budget does not address the elephant in the room. And certainly that is, you know, food shortage, very likely, middle of next year.
But actually also, Dr. Harsha de Silva, we see here that, you know, the 48 different sectors of our economy, there is no plan, no budget, and not specifically addressed on how to grow each of these sectors. Instead, we see money being allocated here and there to district councils or whatever, and to me that appears to be an unplanned sort of electorally motivated distribution of funds.
You could not have said it better.
Which is, isn't it, really?
It is absolutely what it is. I mean, you see, now you spend something like 85 billion rupees on this program, which is essentially what he says is the result of the Gama Samaga Pilisandara. But what it really is that a distribution of money to local government members. And for the first time, the decision maker is the politician, not the you know, the normally practiced or generally accepted this divisional secretary's office. You know, just because the local politician wants to spend on X, Y, or Z, you know, whether it is relevant, whether it meets the various requirements,
whether it is needed,
has to be decided upon by the official there, who's really the divisional secretary. But now it has been given to the local government politicians, which is pure electioneering.
And as the opposition, why are you all sort of berating them and trying to hold them accountable to this? What can you do as opposition?
I mean, look, the people will decide. You see, if this budget is not going to address the big issues. You asked me at the beginning, you know, should we call 1990? And I said, look, we need to be in emergency care. And that is because, you know, the government has accepted the fact that we have completely run out of dollars, that we just don't have money any longer to import crude oil. And I don't know what they're going to stop next. And you know, as a matter of fact, there is no LP gas because they have said that there is they don't have dollars to import LP gas. And when fuel will run out, I do not know. I mean, you can't run a country like this. I mean, we have just completely, you know, scraping the bottom.
And when you opened up by saying about agriculture, they haven't addressed the elephant in the room. Now, I was looking at some figures. It says that Sri Lanka is, out of all its agricultural produce, approximately 2.5% of the land is sort of dedicated to organic produce. But if you look at it in another way, we have 5.7 million families in the country, and if you 2.5 million, 2.5% of that would be 142,000 families who appear to be able to afford organic produce. But if you were just only to double it to say 5, you need another 142,000. But where's the money? Because, you know, people already are hugely challenged. We don't have that kind of, the value of money has come down drastically.
I mean, this thing does not make any sense at all for us. You know, what you're referring to is whether even if organic produce is available in the supermarkets, whether the consumer will be able to afford it.
Yes, so to me it's a question of
That's right.
affordability
That's
as
right.
opposed to production.
Yeah, I mean, if you walk into any of the big supermarkets and go to the organic section,
Yeah.
you will see the prices are always higher than what...
Of course they are.
Yeah. So your issue is how many people can afford it, right? So that's one, you know, angle to it. But the other more important one is, you see, whether it is even possible, right? And the answer is absolutely crystal clear, and that is no. You know, we can't do it, right? So...
And there's something very strange about all this fertilizer business. You know, the ship's there and it won't go away. And every day the demurrage is increasing. And ultimately, I can bet my bottom dollar that ultimately it'll be the people of Sri Lanka, our government, who will have to pay for all that demurrage.
I mean, we will have to pay. There is no way around it. The way I see it, it's a trade finance agreement. And these things cannot be determined by a court in this country. If at all, they'll have to go to some arbitration somewhere and figure out...
But
you know,
surely, Dr. Harsha, isn't the problem with the person or the body that actually placed the order?
Yes,
that they didn't tighten the conditions up?
No, I agree with you. I mean, there's either some hanky-panky or just carelessness.
Yeah.
I don't know which one. That seemed to have been the cause for all of this. And now we are stuck with, if I'm not mistaken, $42 million contract and $9 million worth of fertilizer has already arrived, and like you said, is sitting in or around the port somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, them having to pay demurrage. I mean, look, you know, I don't know how this problem became so, you know, complex, and, you know, to the point that the Chinese embassy has blacklisted, quote unquote, the People's Bank.
People's Bank.
I mean, I don't think that is possible or it has legal validity, but that doesn't matter because what...
But it has huge negative PR impact.
Absolutely, because in finance it's all about confidence. You know, I need to be able to trust the bank to pay, you know, what is owed to me. Of course,
And
there is documentation.
You've just touched on the right word there. Isn't it that Sri Lanka is suffering from a trust deficit?
It is. I mean, the trust deficit can be actually calculated. Now, for instance, if you look at the yields on the secondary market bonds that are trading internationally. For instance, let's take the bond that is due in July of next year for $1 billion. Do you know the yield to maturity on that bond right now? Which means at what price is it quoted in the secondary market? Something that is worth $1 is being sold at such a discount. The yield to maturity on that on an annualized basis is over 40%.
My goodness.
40%. Right? So that is the kind of return people are expecting in order to hold on to that bond, because they're not certain. There is a big trust deficit in terms of whether they will be able to actually get their money. So higher the risk, higher the return. So you're willing to, purchase that bond, with such a expected massive return if the bond is actually paid.
Dr. Harsha, several questions from members of the public. Thank you very much. By SMS 0772 300 305 or by WhatsApp, whatever takes your fancy. But Dr. Harsha, what's the alternative? What can the SJB say? Look, if we were in power, we would do this.
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, if we were in power, we would have already resolved this debt issue. Because, look,
By doing what?
Well, we have to go in for a restructuring. I mean,
It means you'd have to go to the IMF.
Well, I mean, see, you mustn't get this whole IMF thing.
It's not a big wolf.
No, it is not a big wolf, and it is not about going to the IMF for a loan. That's not what we are talking about here. Our debt is not sustainable.
Right.
Right? I mean, we need to make our debt sustainable.
And what would the SJB do?
In order to do that in the medium term to long term, you need to ensure that our, finances are in proper order, that our deficits are manageable, that our revenue is sufficient to at least pay for current expenditure. But in the immediate term, what do we do, right? In the immediate term, we have about $4.5 billion that need to be paid in the next 12 months, just the government of Sri Lanka. And outside the government of Sri Lanka, there's about another $1.5 to $2 billion that need to be repaid. Altogether, we have close to $7 billion that need to be paid, right? And you need dollars for that, no for us. Whether you are paying it or I'm paying it, you need the dollars. I mean, as an importer now, you speak to anybody in PETA, they'll tell you, we can't find dollars to clear our goods.
Well, I met somebody yesterday whose business revolves around importing goods.
Yeah.
He told me that he's having to calculate and fund it all at a rate of 246 to the dollar.
There you go. Day before yesterday, somebody told me it was 241. So if you're saying it's 246,
just last night I had.
Yeah. So you see the crunch. The rate is increasing exponentially, right? So what I'm saying is, if you don't have the money, if we don't have the money to clear food, right, from the port, and we don't have the money, dollars to bring in oil, then certainly we don't have money to pay $1 billion, $500 million, $4.5 billion. In fact, $6 million.
So what would the SJB do?
Yeah. So like I said, we need to restructure these.
But how? How do you restructure that?
So let's look at the international sovereign bonds, right? Those are the big ticket items. $500 million immediate one-time payment in January, $1,000 million in July. So we owe this not to a particular government or a bank. It is owed to a whole bunch of investors who invested in these, various hedge funds, insurance companies, banks, and so on. So you need to be able to have a discussion with them and agree upon a restructuring plan.
So these would be the bigger investors. You can't be restructuring with the smaller ones.
Well, I mean, these the conditions. Anyway, first of all, this is under New York law, not under Sri Lankan law.
Right.
And there are various clauses. And one clause very categorically states that if a restructure is to be agreed upon, 75% of the value, or persons holding 75% of the value will have to agree. Right? So, which means the government of Sri Lanka is not going to be able to speak to all these investors to get 75% of value agreement. So, the IMF can provide a platform and be the convener to have this discussion.
Right.
But and then put their stamp of approval, and then you can have some sort of restructuring. It can be what is called a reprofiling. Faraz, I've said this many times on your program. I've been saying it since 2020 November. 12 months ago I said this, right? And if we were able to go ahead and do it then, right, the problem would not have come to this, right? And now I don't think reprofiling, meaning just delaying payments, is going to work anymore. You'll have to go in for a haircut.
And on that note, let's see how short the haircut should be. Let's take a peek at this evening's headlines from the Newsfirst primetime news team. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
Faraz Shaukat Ali.
Welcome back to Newsline Live. I'm in conversation with Dr. Harsha de Silva, of course, Member of Parliament from the SJB, and the de facto, I suppose, shadow finance minister from the opposition. I have a question from a viewer. Thank you very much, by the way. Several, but this one seems promising and interesting. But Cabral says that he will buy back the bonds at a discount. Is this possible? Part two of that. Do you think Cabral has the ability to discuss with the lenders?
The bunkum, no. I mean, how can you do that? You see, if that bills or bonds are trading at, 60 cents to the dollar, right? And suddenly the central bank is saying, look, we will buy these bonds back. What fool is going to sell it at 60 cents to the dollar? They will request or they will ask for the dollar, right? So the price will increase. So there is not going to be any saving for the country. I mean, this was a non-starter from the beginning. I don't know why even such a statement was made. It was rather, immature to have even suggested that, because we would never have been able to buy it at a discount if the central bank was buying. Right. And the second part to the question is...
do you think Cabral has the ability to discuss with the lenders?
No. Cabral does not have the ability to discuss with a whole bunch of investors in multiple series of these international sovereign bonds. Right? It is true. It is he who's actually floated the first international sovereign bond in 2007.
I remember at the time that the United National Party made it quite clear that they wouldn't pay it.
Well, let's not go there. But now that
that has come to roost now, isn't it?
No, I mean nobody is saying not to pay.
No, but the point is right now we can't pay.
Now the point is we can't pay, right? And no one person can speak to all these investors. That's silly, right? So that is why you need that convener, and not only the IMF will be the convener, it will give confidence to whoever the investors are, right? That Sri Lanka would have a plan to sustain its debt. So you have to have a debt sustainability program in place, so that there will be certain undertakings by the government of Sri Lanka to ensure that they have the funds going forward to pay. And all what you are trying to do is to get some reprieve, to some breathing space. I'm thinking 36 months, right? So that we can get our act together again. And also, this is a preemptive restructuring, right? I mean, I heard Mr. Cabral told, people at the chambers that it will be over his dead body, right? That they go to the IMF. And so did Vasudeva the other day.
Lee Kuan Yew said that it would be over, originally said that it would be over his dead body that Singapore would have casinos. But when the time was right, he himself agreed that casinos was needed in Singapore. I'm just taking an example of how they changed.
Interesting point, because I've read that whole debate in Parliament also, in the Singapore Parliament. I've gone through the casino regulations in Singapore. It's this thick.
And
right?
It actually makes them money.
Actually, and also that discussion, public debate, sort of lasted over, I think, a year or more, right? It was widely debated and discussed. Everybody had their say, right? And only then, once they all agreed, this is how we are going to do it, the regulator, the gaming regulator was
So
set
that
up.
is exactly what this 360-degree discussion and agreement and so on should have been done in terms of our move to organic fertilizer, for example.
Absolutely. I mean, the president the other day was saying the opposition is not supporting. I mean, come on, Mr. President, we've been supporting in terms of giving our views. You know, a number of times, you know, I as one of the key spokespeople of the opposition on economics, in Parliament and outside, have suggested, look, you know, you need to, restructure these facilities in order to move forward, right? So it's unfair, rather unfair, to say that we haven't given a recommendation.
We've got about 7 minutes to go. And somebody's asking, can you give us 3 specific things that the government should do now?
Yeah. First one, obviously, is to restructure the foreign debt payment. The second thing is to immediately review this fertilizer ban, so that we won't have to deal with that, man-made or the
Apparently, the availability of fruit and vegetable across the economic centres 2 days ago was down by 40%.
So that is not surprising.
And what's the third one?
Third one is to make sure that we have a discussion on a plan to move forward. So we take these immediate 2 steps, right? The debt restructuring and the fertilizer issue, and then the third one, immediately start a discussion on how to move forward.
And I'd like to also ask you, what's your, from an economist's point of view, what do you think about the so-called forced conversions? I'm not talking religion, I'm talking foreign exchange.
I mean, I told you here that was going to backfire. Hasn't it backfired? You see, now what has happened to the remittances? It has dropped by 50%. I mean, just look at the central bank's report from a couple of days ago.
It is down by 50%.
From $707
billion.
$1 million a month, it has fallen to 350 million. You know, who is going to forced convert at 199 rupees to the dollar when they can get outside Hawala or Undial or whatever it is at $230 rupees to the dollar? And look at the new rule on service exports. Here we have so many young people, exporting their knowledge, sitting here in Sri Lanka, working on freelance platforms, doing graphic design, doing software, doing all kinds of other things, drawing structural engineering drawings, etc., etc. And then they export them and they receive dollars, right? And to answer Mahinda Rajapaksa Prime Minister's questions on why there are people standing in passport lines, instead of standing in passport lines, they were doing it at home and earning dollars. Now the central bank has slapped this new rule that they have to convert all their dollar revenue, right? Except for the identified inputs, and these software exporters don't have any identified inputs that need to be paid in dollars. And the great thing was they were using technology. All these platforms, Fiverr, Upload, Upwork, or whatever it is, all those things. So that was a new generation of service exports. That is where the dollars were coming from. Now by doing this, you're pushing them to the passport line. It just absolutely makes no sense.
Because you mentioned, and it's twigged a little thing in my memory, shall we both join each other and wish President Mahinda Rajapaksa a very happy birthday?
Yes, we shall do that.
So, very happy birthday to you, Sir Mahinda Rajapaksa. We trust that God will bless you and keep you in good spirit, because I think you're the only one who spoke some sense the other day when you spoke about all these things. But I wonder why. Is there a division? This is politics now. Is there a division within the wonderful family?
I don't know. I mean, blood is always thicker than water, no, for us.
But there's also something odd about what's happening to do with the fuel crisis, because we have the minister who's not talking anything about the planned maintenance of the refinery, which is normally 50 days a year.
Obviously, here the blame is being shifted to the family, isn't it?
Yes. So they're trying to blame Basil.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether there is, division within the family, but there is certainly division between the family and the rest of them.
We had a former member of the Mahinda Rajapaksa team here the other day, Sajin Vasconawardena. He said that he was quite certain that there was no division and that it was rock solid, the unity within the family.
Oh, that's what
what you're saying too
That's
now.
what I'm saying too.
Last 2 minutes. What is the solution now? What must these do immediately?
Yeah,
The quick win.
Yeah, I told you what the quick win is.
So there's no deviation from that.
No.
We need to go to IMF.
Yeah, there's no way. I mean, I heard the finance minister, being interviewed the other day, and he says, look, we don't need to get any more loans. We can improve tourism. We can get $4 billion from, that industry. We can export services. We can export rubber. We can export all. Yes, that's all true. But then that is not going to be immediate. And first of all, before all of that happens, or any of that happens, he needs and the government needs an ideological shift from being what is called an import substitution to export driven. Here you have tariff all around the country and say, you produce your own turmeric, you produce your own tile, right? That is not the attitude that one needs to have if you're going to expand the market for domestic producers. I mean, producers, we need to join the sort of the global marketplace.
So the last bit. Sri Lanka is drifting aimlessly, isn't it?
It's quite obvious, isn't it?
Dr. Harsha de Silva, Mr. 1990, thank you very much for being on our program. And by the way, 1990 is doing excellently well. Thank you for that. And that's the way it was. So let's now join that wonderful team, the Newsfirst team, for the primetime news this evening. Take care, and as always, God bless you.